Don't count the days, make the days count. Muhammad Ali. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your host, Shamisa Ali. Our topic tonight is: should syllabus at academic institutions be adjusted to facilitate national development? The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, the Caribbean, and Guyana. Funding support is by well-known philanthropist Dave Narayan from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh, who is a distinguished political and social scientist.
And good evening to our viewers.
Our panelists tonight are Professor Narayan Prasad, Professor Muniram Budu, and our guest tonight is the CEO of Spherex, and he's also a financial analyst, Mr. JC Bhagwandin. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Tara, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. And we particularly welcome our panelists, Professor Narayan, Professor Budu. Unfortunately, Dr. Ganga is still recovering from an ailment, so we wish him all the best. And we want to welcome our guest tonight, Mr. Joel Bhagwandin. He's a noted figure in the Guyana political and economic areas as well. He's one of the brightest young talent we have in Guyana. I would have thought that he would have been given an advisor role in the government. Maybe he can tell us. But he has been giving a lot of advice and suggestions, constructive advice to the government. And so we are very happy to welcome here. A subject that is very dear to Professor Narayan, Professor Budu, and to our guests is the education system and looking at the syllabus to see whether it's compatible with the development priorities of the country. Dr. Budu has commented on that, and he's even written some articles on this as well. And I think Professor Narayan, being also professor teaching social psychology at A&M University in Florida, would have dealt with this. So before we start, we want to congratulate all those people who have been appointed as government ministers and as advisors. I think that the government say they still have to appoint a lot of other people, etc. Now, before I just want to lay out some quick thing. I've been doing some analysis of the data they have on training, especially the Board of Industrial Training and the Technical Vocational Education Training under the Ministry of Education. One of the fascinating things I find is that the Board of Industrial Training, they usually put out a graduate level about 2,500 per year, but the range of course is about 68 courses they are offering. Just think about 68. Now, I'll tell the significance of that in a moment, but TVET is far less a course. TVET is administered by the Ministry of Education. They have 11 TVET centers located throughout the country, primarily in the coastline. That is Region 1, Region 7, Region 9 do not have TVET centers, but technical training is provided by Board of Industrial Training. They cover all 10 regions. Now, the thing is, I think it was in 2023 or 2024, the Ministry of Labor, the Board of Industrial Training, did a study of people who they train, and they found that only 19 of them were employed in the area for which they are trained. About 56 or 57% were working in other areas outside the scope of training, and the other 24% did not respond. There's a sample of 228. I don't know whether it was a representative sample, but I trust it was because they said there was a part of a trace study. So in that context, I will start and ask. By the way, there are 11 Tibet centers located throughout the country. Um, so we can start with a simple question, Mr. Bhagwandin. Do you see at a general level? Let's start at a general level. The role of education in the economic development of Guyana, and also in personal development. If you can give some broad outline, then we can go down to specifics.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Tara Singh, and and to the other distinguished panelists here and the host. The short answer to the question posed is a yes. Education is the number one most important, of paramount importance to drive economic development. Now, if you look at the level of education of the working, oh, Shivani, you're distracting me. Sorry about that. Yeah. If you look at the level of education based on the labor force statistics report of 2021, the level of tertiary education of the labor market, you have less than 5% of that labor market that possess a tertiary education. One can argue that that correlates to the level of development, excluding for a moment other developmental challenges such as political economy challenges, instability historically, and so on. We have suffered, as you know well, we have suffered from brain drain historically, and that correlates to our state of development. And so, given the development agenda, which is an ambitious development agenda, today I was having a meeting with some overseas investors looking into Guyana, looking at opportunities. And I was telling them that the development agenda of the government, having won the 2025 election just weeks ago, is more than tenfold what it was in the previous term, more than tenfold. And to drive that development agenda, we have to quickly flip that equation or that ratio. We have to flip that ratio of the level of tertiary education or our skilled labor force. We don't have a very skilled labor force in a large percentage. That's what the data essentially tells. And so to drive that development, and if we want our people to benefit in a tangible way from this development, then we have to invest in education for our own people. And we can safely say that the government is doing exactly that with the gold scholarship, the free tertiary education, etc. So I'll pause there for now to say, to answer the question explicitly, that education is important for national development. I've given you the statistics. What is the state of the labor force in terms of the level of education of the labor force? That tells the story of our state of development after nearly 60 years of post independence. We know our challenges well. And so, moving forward, and especially to drive this ambitious development agenda for this 2025 2030 term of the incumbent government, we have to invest heavily in education and the different facets. And that includes, of course, the thematic subject of discussion for tonight, which is the whether the curriculum needs to evolve with the transformation that we can expect with the economy.
Mhm. All right, thank you. Let me put you on to Professor Budu for your opening comments, and if you want to elaborate a little more on what Mr. Bhagwandin just stated.
Well, Joel, good to see you again. Well, I'm supposed to ask you some questions or comment on what you said, but I do not have any question for you on this topic because for me, discussion on this topic will take us further down a rabbit hole that we in the Western Hemisphere were going down for several decades now. Instead, what I will ask the moderator is to allow me some time to explain what I mean by this and to suggest a way forward. So, Tara, would you allow me to do that?
Okay, let's move on to Professor Narayan.
Now, Dr. Tara, I think Professor was asking if you can give him some time to speak on his knowledge of the topic.
Oh, later.
Okay, we'll come back to that, Professor
Oh,
Budu.
Professor Narayan, Professor Budu, you want to do that now in a 3 minute span?
Well, I don't know. I think I probably take all my time today. I think we'll think about probably what I want to say. It's much more comprehensive, and it probably take more
Okay,
time.
all right. So let's get Professor Narayan initial comment, and we'll go
Well,
back to you.
the yeah, the thing is, we cannot in the Guyanese situation. I don't care whether we are in Guyana or we are outside of Guyana. That the current conditions, because of the demands of the current condition, that education should be driven willy nilly by the needs that is basically uh, what is conceptualized as necessary at this point in time. Education has to be very consistent and to try to accommodate because of the rapid advances, the developmental advances. Education cannot be accelerated to that extent. And so we have to be very, very cognizant of that. Because learning does not take place overnight. And so, yes, there is a great need. But what is necessary is to do some kind of analysis on the needs-based areas of education. Yes, we need technological advances, and that's because of the oil industry and the demands of the oil industry. We just cannot push everybody into engineering or the STEM areas just because that is warranted or is in demand right now. Yes, that is necessary, but also health is also necessary. So we have there is a balance, and there it is crucial that the education system try to accommodate, but accommodate based on the needs, and unless you can identify the need areas, because here is what you have to take into consideration: the majority of the Guyanese population were not fully educated to accommodate to the changes, the rapid changes that are taking place in the society. And so there is a lag. And those of us who have been in education all our lives know that it takes years of preparation for one to be proficient in his or her own job responsibilities. So we have to be careful here in when we make or when we propose decisions that the government should undertake. Yes, it is necessary that these be undertaken, but it cannot in any way be rapid because of the way the needs of the country is going and the capabilities of the population that needs to be educated.
Okay, thank you, Professor, give you Professor Budu, give you a chance of somewhat. Let me just go back to Mr. Bhagwandin a bit. Well, I mentioned that's why I mentioned of the 228 sample that they did, only 19% went into job for which they were trained. So it's a question of mismatch. And if you do a feasibility study, that would point you in the right direction. Now, Mr. Bhagwandin, before we get Professor Bodo, want to spend some time on that too. But what are your thoughts on adjusting the curriculum to meet the demands? Was there any study that forecasts the potential labor demand for the next 5 years available?
So thank you. I tend to agree. I tend to agree to an extent, or largely rather, with Professor Narayan. Uh, his points of contention on the skills mismatch and whether the curriculum needs to be adjusted. There are several points that I'd like to bring out clearly in this regard, and not just from an academic discussion per se perspective, but from my experience having, as you know, I serve in a relatively diverse capacity here in Guyana across both the public sector and the private sector. And from my experience in dealing with both sectors and the skill sets and knowledge base of the human resources and the quality of resources that we have, against the backdrop of the less than 5% of tertiary education that I've already established, the small pool of qualified human resources that we have in the market, when you advertise for jobs, the jobs that are advertised, the job needs in the market, that the market demands, you would find that, and I've been involved in a lot of recruitment at various levels across the public and private sector. And what I have found is that there's a huge skills mismatch. You have a lot of good, impressive CVs out there, you have a lot of good qualified people out there, but the requirements for that specific function, they don't have the skill sets that we're looking for. They don't have the competencies that we're looking for. So there's a lot more work in terms of a study to be done. I'm aware that several studies have been commissioned through the Ministry of Labor. Other studies have been done to determine the skills need in the market by other private sector agents on a medium term basis. But there's a more granular study that is required, to Professor Narayan's point, to be able to identify the gaps in the market currently and to project the needs of the market. In addition to that, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience here in the market, is that it may not necessarily be a lack of the appropriate courses, the appropriate training available in the market. What I also find to be true is that the job seekers, those who are coming out of university, coming out of high school and going into university, they need more guidance to understand the market into what they should study, because a lot of them are going to the traditional areas without a thorough understanding of how to assess the market and identify the needs in the market, and to accordingly equip themselves towards those needs. So there is in addition to the need to look at your curriculum, to make adjustments to your curriculum, there is also, I think, an awareness drive or an educational drive to help to guide the new potential, the new potential human resources entering the market to educate the labor market, the pool of um, human resources that we have, to help to point them in that direction. So there's more work need to be done, at least from my vantage point, in that regard.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that goes back to Professor Narayan's point that the general public got to lift their level of understanding. I would imagine that schools will have guidance counselors, but I'm not sure. Probably, if they have guidance counselor, they can help direct them to the appropriate skills that are required in the economy. Now, let's go over to Professor Budu. Professor Budu, go ahead.
Well, Professor Narayan mentioned education system. He mentioned STEM, and I will start here. And I think the issues that Joel mentioned clearly indicate that there is a mismatch between the needs, education needs, and the education system that we have. Definitely a mismatch, and it's not only in Guyana. This is happening throughout the world, mainly in the Western Hemisphere is that matter. And the reason is fundamental, because the system we have was created during the Industrial Revolution. The goal was to produce factory workers, not creators, not innovators, not thinkers. Over the years, what we have done is tinker on this system, like what the topic is indicating here, to change things here and there to produce workers such as, for example, programmers, analysts, like our dear friend here, Joel, right? And so forth. For the digital revolution, which is something called the third industrial revolution. Emphasis, or better yet, overemphasis has been placed on science, technology, engineering, and math, STEMs in schools. And the reason for that, this follows from US students' poor performance in mathematics, science among industrial nations as measured by the PISA test. I wouldn't explain what's the PISA test, but I will ask my viewers to go on the web and see what it is. Many countries, including Guyana, copycat the USA. Although they did not use or did not ask their students to take this step, nor they participate at all. But STEM is a failure, despite millions or billions of dollars being spent. Just look at the statistics. US students' performance did not improve, and in some years it decreased. Not much improvement occurred in Guyana and elsewhere, right? Recently, they figured that people didn't understand humanities and so on, so art was added onto it, and it's now called STEAM, right? Now we have the fourth industrial revolution, AI, robotics, connectivity, and so on. And this will fundamentally reshape human life and education. The popular opinion is that we need creators, innovators, problem solvers, and free thinkers. The system we have, they can't do that. The system we have is like a well-worn old shirt with lots of patches and patches and patches that we have, right? What is really needed is a new shirt. We need to address the issues that will arise in this fourth industrial revolution. The current system of a teacher drilling existing information, basically data into your head of students, and then forcing them to regurgitate this in some tests that only measures ability to remember, rather than a measure of intelligence or ability to analyze, synthesize, and apply knowledge, the kinds of things that Joel says is missing. It's really a one-size-fits-all system. Today, all human knowledge is on this device. See this device? All human knowledge is on this, right? Now, why force this data that is on this device into people's head? What you need to do with this is to determine the accuracy of the data you get and how to use it to improve your life. You cannot teach creativity. You cannot be creative by reading textbooks. That's what we do in schools these days. And certainly, tests do not measure creativity. You have to be challenged in an environment that creativity to flourish. Most students know how to use their mobile devices better than their teachers. Just look at the dexterity of a child as, as she or he types on your mobile device or swipe, and you will realize how clumsy you are. Why not incorporate this talent into education? My suggestion is that Guyana be one of the leaders in creating a new system of education for 21st century living. Some countries, for example, Singapore and India, have been developing this system. We cannot copycat these systems because we must consider our own history, our own cultures, and our own developmental needs. I cannot describe the potential system here. I've done so in some published articles. You may ask why Guyana must be a leader rather than a follower. Let me provide 4 reasons why Guyana is in a unique position to do so. It is a small country, less than 800 people. It's not like the US, where you have many states and many constituents, right? Any new system requires political will, boldness, risk-taking, and having the right people. President Ali, for example, stated education is one of the sectors he will transform. Over the last 5 years, the government built more schools, gave out cash grants, provided laptops and computers, and trained a lot of teachers. But these are not transformative. These are just providing more access, modern tools, and trained staff. So you guys could remember when we had transformer toys? You have a toy truck, and then you can manipulate that toy truck to create a figure of a man, for example. So you're taking something and make it into something else. That is transformation. Putting stickers in the toy truck is not transformation. It may look nice, but it's still a truck. We got lucky. Third thing I'm saying, we got lucky. We found oil and gas and have money from this and other natural resources. And the last point here, we have talents locally in Guyana and in diaspora. The government has to make better use of its diaspora. And let me address this higher education thing that we are just talking about in this session. I have provided my ideas on how higher education can be transforming Guyana to meet the evolving development needs to top government officials. This system can produce graduates that will meet those needs through creativity, problem solving, complex comprehension, agility, and flexibility. And I know Joel has mentioned that people have been trained, I think Tara also, in areas that they're not working in, right? So you have to be flexible. And how you apply cutting edge technologies such as AI. They will also have a sense of well-being and connectivity to the rest of the humanity environment. COVID has taught us a lesson, and AI will make sure that lesson is being hammered in. A lot of people wouldn't have jobs, and you will get depression and all kinds of things setting in. Lastly, some of you may say that I am suggesting a utopian system that cannot be accomplished by Guyanese, perhaps a legacy of colonial thinking. Indeed, I think it's a utopian, and I make no apology. It is bold, it is far-reaching, it is fresh thinking. And I'm willing to accept conventional paradigm, and I think President Ali has demonstrated he's willing to take risks. Transformation is always suspicious, it is threatening, it's arduous, and uncertain, but it provides the opportunity for creativity and for high rewards. Let me finish this, Tara, by making a quote from attributed to a Nobel laureate, Alex Carrel. And I quote, he said, "Every child is a genius only to be converted into an idiot in our school," unquote. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Joel, you like to respond?
I just want to take 2 of Professor Munira, Professor Pudu's point and add a different perspective to it. The point he made about the device, all the knowledge that we need to have is stored in a device that we carry with us. Therefore, there is no need to memorize things or memorize everything. And that is an important point, very crucial point to note, because our curriculum, tying that point to our curriculum, while there are incremental changes being made over time to evolve our curriculum at all levels, primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of education, are still largely knowledge based and to a lesser extent competence based. So what you have a lot of graduates coming out of high school, coming out of university with a degree. They have the knowledge, but they lack the competency. They lack the ability to apply that knowledge, to apply the theoretical framework to solving complex problems. That's a different perspective to the point Professor Buru made in that regard, which is very important. And we have that's a major problem across public and private sector. The other point is somebody say something.
No.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The the other point is that there is something else Professor Budu said, and I can't remember what it was, but there's something else notable that he said that I wanted to pick up on. When I remember, I'll come back to it. I got distracted.
Well, if you
Okay.
want to think about that, Dr. Tara, we'll take a quick break at this
Yeah.
point and we'll be right
Okay.
back.
Go ahead. Okay.
All right, you're back.
Before I pass you on to Professor Rai, I just want to make two quick. Um, you're talking about graduates who lack the competency. Isn't there a work study program attached to university or other places where before you graduate, they put you on assignment to various industries or any workplace so you can develop practical skills and know how to apply them? Joel, do you know if you
There,
have
there
that?
is some, there is some of that, but not largely.
Not widespread.
Alexander, could you lower the television, please, or take it
Mhm.
off?
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah,
so is not.
but on that point, Professor, I want to say that that is not suffice. The thing about competency, it has to be the curriculum, and to develop
Mm.
your applied skills, it has to be at the curriculum level, where you're not studying to cram to pass an exam. You got to do things like case studies and solving problems in case study analysis and that type of stuff, looking at real world complex issues. And so that's where we have to evolve
Yeah,
to. If
well,
that's where we have to get in terms of
you can
building
have it there, but
more
the,
competence.
the practical application will happen in actually in the fields, in the workplace. Now, the other thing about education, we got to be careful there because the education for two purpose. Don't forget you pursue a particular um, aspect of it based on your personal needs. Like I might want to be a singer. I'll go to a school where you learn to sing. I may want to do it as a vocation or private, etc. So education has two components: the personal development and then the wider societal contribution they can make. So a lot of people will not necessarily go into skills area where you can build schools, build roads, build bridges. They want to go into the arts, the humanities, etc. Get into philosophy where they can promulgate on issues because the whole science is founded upon philosophy. So that's why I think and we got to be careful and not compartmentalize everything in one. That education, it depends on how you see it, how you perceive it, how you're trained to perceive it. Anyhow, Professor Lorraine,
Yeah,
over to you.
I'd like to go back to one of the points that Joel made, and then come to one of the points that Dr. Budu made. The point I want to go back to that Joel made has to do with the tertiary sector of education. Right now, that is much more in demand given Guyana's developmental projects that are going on. We need a skilled workforce. We need people who are able to supply the labor force so that it can facilitate the continuation of those developmental projects that are going on. But after that, what? So we have to, in the Guyanese context, we can't jump ahead too far out and say we should begin to adopt the systems that are in the United States or in other parts like Singapore, other parts of the world. It takes a lot of preparation. And so we have to be on guard. And I'd like to go back to the concept that Joel uh, keeping alive, so to speak, is that the syllabus, the curriculum that is developed to educate our students, have to remember that the training of Guyanese was not based on diversified occupations. Because, for one thing, we didn't have a manufacturing economy. So, this is something that is now evolving. In It was based on agriculture, but it was based on agricultural labor. And so, you cannot detach yourself from that system overnight. And so, we have to be cognizant that that's the dynamics, the societal dynamics in which we are dealing. Now, if I jump ahead and I'm jumping ahead here, that Dr. Budu mentioned is that in the process of education, we should not only emphasize how to earn a living, but to also teach our students how to live. Because in a competitive world, you can end up with a set of trained people with no jobs that are there because the jobs are not developing as fast as the need is. So if you have to go back to the curriculum based kind of education, which in our days was based on memorization and regurgitation, we have to come back and encourage people, like what Dr. Budu said, is to how to be creative, how to be analytical, how to use the talents that they have with the kind of occupational availabilities that the country provide. And this calls for what educators today are saying, that it's the student learning centered type of education. It is not what Gilberto Freire referred to as the pedagogy of the oppressed, because we all grew up under the pedagogy of the oppressed, in which what the early people, those of us who were growing up in Guyana, my age, your age, Dr. Tar, your age, Dr. Budu, we were looking for a governmental employment because that was the ideal. But we have gone past that ideal. And so we have to restructure education. And in restructuring our education, we should not overcompensate by stifling, if I should bridge what Joel and Dr. Budo are saying, not stifle the creativity of the individual in making accommodations for his or her life or her occupational aspirations.
Okay, thank you. Joel, you want to respond to what Professor Narain said?
Uh, Nothing to respond to, just to concur with Professor Narain. We can frame that in a theoretical perspective. And the theory that I'm referring to is there are 5 stages of economic development. And the first one is known as the traditional society. And the traditional society is one in which you have subsistence agriculture, the agriculture sector that Professor Narayan just referenced, and it's agriculture labor in a traditional sense. And we have evolved out of that type of society. We are now moving into, or we're already in, the second stage of development, which is referred to as the preconditions for takeoff. And the preconditions for takeoff is characterized by external influences such as trade, investment, technology, development of infrastructure, and the emergence of more productive agriculture and small scale industries, the manufacturing industries. And when we speak of agriculture here, not agriculture in the traditional sense. And if you listen to the president keeps hammering home the point to move away from traditional agriculture to, to contemporary agriculture by employing cutting edge technology and so forth that Professor Budu speaks about. So the economy has evolved. It is no longer considered to be a traditional society. In a traditional society, it is more labor driven and more so unskilled labor. Now we need more skilled labor, and we need a variety of skills in different areas, in technology as well, not just engineer, but in accounting as well. We have a shortage in almost every profession. We have a shortage of accountants, we have a shortage of finance professionals, we have a shortage of engineers, a major deficit of engineers. We have shortages of health care workers, occupation and safety workers, shortage of attorneys, every sector, hospitality and tourism. We have deficit in almost every sector, the service sector and so forth. And is this is what we are talking about in terms of, this is a new economy. It is not the economy that we grew up in. And so this stage that we're in is also laying the foundation for another stage, the third stage of development, which would require another set of new skill sets, new competencies, etc., a new level. So within that framework, we can analyze the labor market needs, we can analyze the education sector and situate the transformation of the education sector that we're talking about, which would require a lot of work. And as Professor Narain posited, that this is not going to be, by any measure, an overnight process. It's going to take a long time to get there. But, and already, we haven't said much so far about what is being done at the national level. We've touched on that briefly, but I just want to also acknowledge that this reality is recognized by the government, and they have a deep rooted understanding of the requirements of the current state and what is required going forward. And they have already started to make over the last 5 years, and I expect them to continue. And they've signaled that as well, looking at the composition of the advisors and so forth that they've put together in the Ministry of Education to make those incremental changes in the education sector um, across those facets, including the curriculum, introducing new courses, etc.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there there are so many things. Um, I think you talk about stage of development. You're referring to Rosto phase of development.
WW Rasta.
Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the things that is very important in the Guyana context, we've been focusing a lot on what government, but the private sector is playing a key role in skill development and training. They have trained over 10,000 people already. And in the oil and gas sector, they have been doing the training. They set up this 13 million simulator at Port Morant, where they're training batches of people to serve their industry. So the private sector is more or less, they're still deficient in certain skills, but the oil and gas sector is catering for their own, so they're sending people overseas. Even the new shore base, they sent off some people to Canada recently to be trained. So this private sector, I believe, has a lead over government in this area, but we must not underestimate their role. To they are part of the process of development. Again, as a matter, the private sector is the engine of economic growth. So they play a large part. And I was told that they work in close collaboration with government. But one of the things I want us to focus a little on, Professor Budu, is that we have awarded over 39,000 scholarships, most of them in the gold area. But people can apply for anything that they want to do and not necessarily have anything with the development trust of the country. How you think that gold scholarship methodology, we could reform that to get it more effective and more applicable to the development priorities of the country, or what? Or we should still allow people to choose whatever area they want at the taxpayers' expense?
I think that's a losing game, and I tell you why. And I think what Joel has said, that there's a third phase coming up, right? And with some of those skill sets in measured engineers and so on, there'll be a third phase. That phase is already here. And let me explain. Let me explain by giving two examples. In starting 1999, I received several U.S. National Science Foundation grants to look at what was called then asynchronous education. Today it's called online education. One of those grants was to develop a simulated laboratory where students can do laboratory tests on their computer as if they're in a real lab. Now, it took me and two of my students a whole year to write their software. One of those students happened to be my son. Now, last year I used ChatGPT 2 and tell it to write that program. It took 2 minutes. 2 minutes to write that program. And when I ran it, it's better than I've written it. It's much more efficient, right? So you look, a whole year, 3 persons, right? And this ChatGPT does it in 2 minutes and better. The second thing is, for example, I use ChatGPT again to ask me to design, as an engineer, design an office building. It's a 1-story building. Now, it will take me as an engineer, it will take me about 2 days to do the design, and it will take the draftsman at least a week to 2 weeks to produce the drawings. So I asked GPT to do it. ChatGPT did it in about 5 minutes. All the design, it did the drawings for me, and when I checked it, they were all correct. Right? So you see where we are? Now I use ChatGPT 2. Now there's ChatGPT 5. So you see where this technology is going and how this is going to affect what we produce. You mentioned, Tara, about person want to be a singer. You're not going to get a job, right? You have to be flexible, right? You have to be like a man of all kinds of things, and you have to be able to learn how to learn. Right?
Let me just ask you a quick question there. If you can depend on technology to that level, what does that do to our creativity? It will blunt the desire to be creative if you depend on technology to provide all this.
No, what that means that there's no more challenges. You see, once this technology comes fully on stream, and in fact, they are on stream already. I know of a lot of things. In fact, I visited a factory, right, where they're producing certain equipment for aircraft. And when you go in this factory, there's nobody in there, right? Everything is done by robot. The truck the truck that is robot driven, it takes it to the shipping yard, right, and the ship unloaded with robots. You see nobody around there. That technology is already there. But in every technology and in life, there's more challenges, and you have to be able to face those challenges. Get up by creativity. Now, look at a child. Look at and I challenge you. Look at a 4 or 5 year old, right, and see when they're playing what they do. They're always discovering things, right? And we have to be like childlike. We have to give people the space, the environment to play and to encourage them and to use this technology, right? And let me just clarify something. I know Professor Narayan had mentioned Singapore. I mentioned Singapore and India. And I state clearly that we cannot copycat these countries, right? We have to develop our own system. For example, India developed a system called Indian Knowledge System that they introduced 2 years ago, I believe, right? We cannot use that system because it's based on thousands of years of education, how they educate Indians, right? We cannot use that system, right? So what I'm saying, right, that we always have to keep changing. We always have to be flexible. And all of these disciplines that we have, straight cut this way, you're an engineer, you're an arts major, you're an economist, it's not going to happen, right, in the future, right? You have to be flexible. And we have to work in groups, right? Because if you look at a simple problem of a flooding, and you say, give us an engineer, that's not going to work. Flooding, it affects the economy, right? It affects health, right? All of those things have to be combined. They have to be a team of people working on this and come up with innovative solutions.
Okay.
I want to comment on Professor.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a slightly different view on artificial intelligence and tools such as ChatGPT and so on. And my view is that with the advent of artificial intelligence, it's a good thing. Like everything else, it also has disadvantages. But more importantly, and I don't want those who are students viewing this program now or later, I don't want them to be carried away with the misconception that artificial intelligence is a I don't want them to be carried away with the misconception that artificial intelligence is a substitute for human intelligence. I use artificial intelligence, I use ChatGPT as well, but it's not a substitute. What it does, it makes my work easier and I become more efficient and more productive. Additionally, it is not to be used in a manner that without supervision, because it does produce incorrect results as well. And I've used it and I've tested it and it has produced incorrect calculations, incorrect analysis, and so forth. So you have to know how to use it, know how to use it correctly, and the output of any artificial intelligence tool has to be supervised by human intelligence, has to be validated. So it's not a substitute for human intelligence. It is not going to replace human intelligence. What it simply does and will do is that it makes your work, it optimizes your efficiency, it makes you more
Mhm.
productive, and therefore makes life better. That is what it does.
Yeah,
Just wanted to.
I just before we go to Professor Narayan, I agree with you to some extent there, Mr. Bhagwandin, because I use that too. And when I go in, certain key data that I had, it completely eliminated and put his own word in, which doesn't relate to what I was trying to do. I tried it many times, and that's happened. So it's not a perfect tool. People must understand that artificial intelligence may be good, but it's not good in every case. So
You got to know
you're
how to
correct.
use it. You got to know how to use
Yeah,
it and don't
correct.
abuse it. Yes,
Um,
Dr. Tara, we're gonna do our closing remarks at this time.
um,
The,
what's the
I,
time we have? We have 58. Okay, let's give Professor Narayan the final thing.
yeah,
Yes.
I like to quickly pick up on what Joel is saying and what Dr. Budu is saying. If I go back to what Joel has posited already, is that we have to go back to the Guyanese society. And I hate to go to say that, Daniel Lerner, when he talked about the passing of the traditional society, with Rosto talking about the economic development of the society, we can't skip stages and bring Guyana forward into into this age as what Dr. Budu is talking about, the ideals. Yes, I agree with Dr. Budu, but I am not in complete agreement that that is what we should aspire to at this point in time in the Guyanese society, because there are a lot more to be taken care of in the Guyanese society. Even Federico Fagan, one of the architects of artificial intelligence, said that we cannot forget consciousness. And if you go back to Federico Fagan, and if you go back to um, uh, what's his name again for iPhone, he went back to Paramahans Yogananda in terms of meditation and consciousness. All these people are going back to consciousness and say, how can you divide? How can you just jump to all of these advances without understanding who you are or where you're at? And that's where I agree with Joel that we need to take our time. And maybe, yes, what Dr. Budu is saying, we are working towards that, but we cannot jump, we cannot leapfrog and get there.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay. Thank.
Dr.
Okay.
Narai, I didn't mention that about I didn't use the word consciousness, but well-being is part of that, right?
All right. Thank you.
That is very important, right?
Right.
In what we do,
Yes.
and we must
Shamisa,
aspire.
Shamisa, over to you.
Well, we'll go ahead and ask Joel to give us his closing remarks.
I'll keep my closing remark very simple. That all that have been discussed here tonight, these realities are not new. They are situated within the consciousness of the decision makers, fortunately, and we must acknowledge that they're making the necessary decisions and incremental changes that are necessary to evolve our education system in alignment with the development needs of the economy. So that will be my closing remark for tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our viewers for taking the time to be here this evening. Thank you to our panel, and thank you to our guests.
Yeah.
Until next time, I'm your host, Shamisa Ali, and this is the Guyana Dialogue. We also would like to send best wishes to the Guyana Amazon Warriors for Sunday's game. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.